Good afternoon. I'm glad to be here with you all today as we begin a brand new series, Will You Be Mine? In this love season, we hear that often. I remember being in the 4th and 5th grade and reading the little, sweet tarts, be mine. Will you be my Valentine? I remember growing up from that and around high school time, I don't know how many of you had, the carnations delivery program in high school. You'd sign up and then you'd be able to send the person that, you want to let them know you appreciate them. You'd send them a little carnation. I remember while I was in high school, it was not the best time for me. I mean, some of you know I didn't always look this good. There was a time when the Lord had not graced me with beauty as of yet. And so, Valentine's was a little hard for me while everybody was getting their carnations and everyone was sending them. It was, I was in the corner, figuring out, can anybody be mine? Many of us have found the one we consider ours. And then there are those of us who are still struggling, kind of like when I was in high school, trying to figure out who can I belong to and who will belong to me. And then there are those of us who found someone but wish it was another. Just say mercy. Don't look at the person next to you. Don't nudge, don't budge, just smile. And if they look at you, just go, I love you, honey. The reality is this relationship issue is a complicated thing because each and every one of us struggle with the desire to belong to another. From the moment we are born, from the time we are conceived, we have the desire to belong. We want to be loved. In fact, we are made for love. Born for it. At the end of the day, the one thing science cannot try to explain is love. You can explain evolution, you can explain cellular respiration, cellular multiplication. You can talk about the idea that creatures go from one stage to another. But there's two things science just don't understand how to explain. One, life. Evolution cannot explain when, where, how, and why did life begin. Nor can they understand this love thing. And in the ideology that all of us are here to, survive, and this idea of survival of the fittest, it doesn't make sense that someone would give up their own life for someone else. Or that because of love that you would do the most incredible things. I mean, some of you women know you're married today because there was once a time he knew how to love you. I mean, just look straight. Some of you know that there was a time when he stood at the bus stop just waiting for you. He would come drive and pick you up in the car and go to 4 different places which you never complained, always smiled. And when your food was nasty, come on somebody, and didn't taste that good and was salty and crusty, he ate it and said, baby, thank you so much for this meal. And you, men, there was a moment when she was the object of your affection, and no matter what happened in your life, as long as you knew you would see her at the end of the day, that's all that mattered to you. And even though you know the food was bad, you'd stop by the Wendy's and grab a nice fish sandwich. Eat a little bit just so you can be content and go home and eat your salty salmon and no taste rice because you loved her. And because of love, you did whatever it took. But somewhere along the way, that energy, that desire, that motivation dissipated. And then there are those of us who never had that. Can I be real with you? It was an accident you didn't think was going to happen. It was one fling, one thought. Can I be real in the church, or that stuff don't happen in church? Hello? It wasn't something you planned. In fact, you said, I'd never end up with a guy like that. And for you, man, you used to look and go, that's the last person on my list. But it was a bad day. You had a rough day that day. Something happened. Things happened. End up married. And now 20, 10, 5, 2 years down the road, you're going, why in the world did I let this happen to me? And there are those of you who are way beyond that. You tried the marriage thing, you tried the love thing, and then it didn't work out. For whatever reason, you drifted apart, and now you're on the other side of marriage. You're one of the D's. You never thought that would have been you. You didn't think that I've heard about it, but for me, I'm always going to be married, and now I'm on the other side, and I'm on the D list. You never thought you'd be on the D list. And now you're wondering, what's left for me? Whenever the pastor starts talking about marriage, you kind of sit a little bit differently. And whenever relationships start being talked about, you go, well, I'm done with, because, I don't know where to go next, and I'm never going to try this love thing again. Many of you are in the room, and you hear about belonging and you long for it. But you're wondering, how do I get there? And I'm here to tell you today, I truly believe with all of my heart, the reason why so many of us struggle to belong is because we've been wanting to belong to the wrong source. I believe that true belonging begins with your Creator. And that the reason why you struggled from relationship to relationship, and you've been with Mario, Julio, Benny, Tommy, Brad, Chad, Billy, and Molly. You've tried everything. Why? Because you're searching after the right thing in the wrong place. The reality is this, is that until I learn to long after the one who's been longing after me, I will never belong to someone else. Let me say it one more time, because this is it. I could close out right now, but I got to prove it to you in the scripture. Until I learn to long after the one who longs after me, I will never belong to anyone else. It is only in longing and pursuing after the one who is love will I ever learn to love. And the reason why I've been struggling to love is because I don't know love. And when I know love. 1 John chapter 4, verse 19. 1 John 4, verse 19 says, we love. Why? Because he first loved us. We love Because he first loved us. Here's the statement that John is making here, that until I have been loved by love, I will not be able to love. Until I've been loved by love, I will not be able to love. Because only in loving love will I know what it means to love. Let's go back. Let's rewind. 1 John 4, verse 16. And so we know and rely. We know and rely on the love God has for us. You hear that? We know and rely on the love God has for us. Many of us rely on the wrong person in order to know love. We know and rely on the love God has for us. What else? God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them. The reality is, until I learn to live in love, I will not know what it means. Until I learn to live in God, I will not know what it means to live in love. The story is told by Jesus of two debtors in Luke chapter 7. Two people who owed something to someone else. And he tells this story, this parable about two people who owe, and he asks the question, well, who loves the most? And he asked the question because he ends up being at dinner with a Pharisee. In Luke chapter 7, starting at verse 36, the story is told of a dinner party that Jesus went to, of a Pharisee and a couple of folks who happened to be there. A couple of crazy things happened at this dinner party. And it's interesting to see who people are. It says, now one of the Pharisees, verse 36, invited Jesus to have dinner with him. So the Pharisee invited who? Jesus to have dinner with him. I want to show you that there's some folks who are just plain old, they're audacious. They're audacious. And you've got to give them respect for being bold in their audaciousness. So the Pharisee invites Jesus to have dinner with him. So he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. When a woman who had lived a sinful life in that town learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, she bought an alabaster jar of perfume, and she stood behind him at his feet weeping. She began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. Now, a couple of things here. I want to teach you about love, okay? And the basis of my entire message today is that only when I've been loved by God will I know how to love someone else. And only when I long after the one who's been longing after me will I ever belong to someone else. Jesus is in the dinner place with a couple of people. There are some folks there who believe that they're better than the others, but they're in the same house, and that kind of confuses me. He's in the house of a Pharisee. The Pharisee's complaining about the woman touching him, but that's his house. He says if he knew who she was, but my problem is, hey, how do you know? that's my first question. Second question says, when the woman learned that Jesus was going to be there, how did she learn? She must be in the inner network of this Pharisee who is to remain nameless. He's in the network. She finds out you're going to have Jesus at your house. I don't know if it was at midnight or at noon that she found out about this coming dinner party. But somehow she finds out that Jesus is going to be at the house, and she brings some alabaster. She brings, watch this, her toolkit, what she knows how to use, what she's familiar with. She knows how to nurture. She knows how to care for. She knows how to cater. And she brings her alabaster perfume because she's found out there's a man in the house I want to meet. She has encountered several men in her life before, and she knows how to deal with men. But this man is different. The Pharisee is looking at the woman, and he doesn't say, "What are you doing at my house?" He doesn't ask, "Well, do I know you?" I mean, let's be upfront. Some woman from town, sinful, quote unquote, is in your house. And you're just going to be like, that woman. And here's the crazy thing, is that he doesn't even say anything to her or have the audacity to speak up. He's just saying it in his mind, contemplating. I wonder what else was going on in his mind. Here's the crazy thing. Many of us don't realize that the reason why we are hurting for love is because we have been hurt by love. Many of us have been abused by love, and so keep on pursuing for the love that abused you. Can I be real for 2 seconds? Many times you end up with the same thing you hate. Can I be honest with you? I see people come from relationship to relationship. They go from marriage to marriage. They talk to me about Julio and all the things they hate about Julio and why they have to divorce Julio. 2 months later, they're with Mario, and Mario looked exactly like Julio. Hello? So then when I talk to them and I'm trying to figure out why is Mario better than Julio, well, he loves me. That's what you said about Julio. The problem with men is that let me take a step back. When women get hurt, they pursue after the very thing that hurt them. It's part of the curse. It's part of the curse. See, God said to the female, your desire will always be with him. It's part of the curse. So even though you hate the man, you're running after the man. Even though you can't stand him, you need him. And when you realize you need him, you go feminist. I'm my own woman, and I don't need no man. When men get hurt, they got to act all tough and all bad. But the truth is, men are the most sensitive creatures that has ever walked this earth. I gotta tell the truth on us. Pastor Lynch, I gotta let them know, Pastor Lynch. I gotta let them know. Listen, men are the most sensitive creatures, so we get hurt by one woman and we say, that's it. No more. So now I'm Mr. Tough Guy, and I'm not letting anybody in. And often, it wasn't even a woman that we were in love with that hurt us. It might have been our mothers. Or perhaps we are hurt because our role model, our fathers, never showed us how to treat our mothers. And so because we've been damaged, we don't know how to give what we never received. And so we're stuck judging instead of loving. We're stuck abusing, and the worst thing is we hate ourselves when we do it. We yell, we scream, we get angry, then we run into our rooms. Why am I like this? We make promises we can't keep. Last time, honey, never happened again. And you keep thinking that you can make yourself better or that you can change yourself. The reality is the only place you can be restored is at the feet of love. Simon, I promise, was hurt by love. And that's the reason why he knows what kind of woman that is. I'm pretty sure he's been by her bedside trying to get restored and healed by the very thing that abused him. This woman comes to Jesus, and somehow she must have known of John's commentary that says, we love because he first loved us. She must have understood that we know and rely on the love he has for us. And so she comes with everything that she has and everything that she knows, and she finally is longing after the one who has been longing for her. And notice what she does here. The Bible says she comes in with her alabaster box. She's wiping Jesus' feet with her hair. She's crying, pouring out. You know what's happening with this woman? She's worshiping. Notice what Jesus says. Jesus answered Simon after he had in his mind that thing about what kind of woman this is as she's pouring her heart and her life to Jesus. Jesus says to him, verse 41, 2 men owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he canceled the debts of both. Now, which of them will love him more? Which of them will love him more? Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt canceled. You have judged correctly, Jesus said. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? Do you hear the question? Do you see her? In his mind, she's an object to be used, not a person to be seen. You know, the first name given to God was El Roi. It was given to God by Hagar, who was used. There's a sermon called The Mad Black Woman. Hagar, the Egyptian, angry because here she is being used by Abram and Sarai, and when they get what they need from her, they kick her out. Just an object to be used. She's left out in the desert. Belongs to no one, just an object to be used. And when she's done with, she's gone. And she's in the middle of the desert crying and pouring out her heart to God. And she encounters God, and God says, Hagar, I've heard the cry of the baby. And Hagar cries out in worship, El Roi, El Roi, the God who sees me. He finally sees me. Jesus says to Simon, do you see this woman? Look at what she's done. I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. He says, you did not give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, for she loved much. But he who has been forgiven little loves little. Then Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. Your sins are forgiven. Your sins are forgiven. The other guests began to say among themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. Here's my question. The other guests up to this point haven't said anything. They haven't chimed into the conversation. They're just looking at this conversation going on. And somehow in the middle of the conversation, Jesus says to this woman, your sins has forgiven you. And all of a sudden they start talking among each other. Who is this? What kind of man is this? The last time they had that same conversation was when 4 friends had taken a man who couldn't walk and who couldn't do for himself and brought him down into a house where he couldn't get into. And Jesus says to that man, your sins are forgiven. And everybody goes, who is this that even forgives sins? Because the Bible says that they saw the man started to walk. He was healed. But here, it doesn't seem to mention any demonstration of a miracle. All it seems to say is that Jesus says to her, your sins are forgiven. But then they still say, who is this? I have to conclude that although it was just a word spoken, something changed in the woman that made him go, who is this? They had to recognize that somehow, some way, Jesus had transformed her life. It wasn't even a declaration, it was a demonstration of love that made her go from sinner to saint. She, turning to Jesus, pouring out her heart and her soul, found that the only way she'll ever be healed is if she longs after love. And she did it by pouring out her entire self. As you go through this year and we're trying to teach you how to pray, the reality is, in many of you, in order to pray right, you've got to pursue right. You got to pursue after the right person. Many of you ask the question, when you're asking, will you be mine or who should be mine? You say, Pastor, I don't know if this person's the right one for me or if that person's the right one for me, or maybe I should get a divorce, or maybe I should stay in the marriage, or maybe I should get married. And the question I want to say to you, the thing I want to say to you is you're asking the wrong questions. It's not about whether this person or that person is the right. It's, are you pursuing after the one who's right for you? My prayer should not be, Lord, send me somebody. My prayer should be, Lord, please help me to long after you. Because the minute I learn to long after God, the person who's also longing after God will long after you. If both of you are longing after the same person, you'll end up at the same destination. If I still keep trying to pursue after him or pursue after her, you guys will be pursuing after each other, and you guys don't know how to love. So he doesn't know how to love you, she doesn't know how to love him, and yet you're trying to fix this marriage thing. The only way the marriage thing gets fixed is if both of you decide, I'm going to pursue after the one who shows me how to love, and I'm going to rely on his love, then I'll be able to belong to you. Notice that before God presented Adam with Eve, Eve had her time with her father. I don't know what happened before God gave Eve to Adam. I don't know what happened before he stepped into the picture. But look, God spent his own time with Adam, building him and showing him what to do, how to till the garden, how to take care of the garden. Then he puts him to sleep. He wakes up somehow later, and it says that God brings Eve to Adam. That means he must have spent some time with her, because by the time she shows up, all Adam does is give a 3-line poem, and she's like, I do. Which means there had to be some time where he was spending with Eve to say to her, this is what it means for a man to love you. This is the kind of love you should accept from a man. This is what it means for a man to be there for you. The reality is this. In this series, as we explore this love thing, what Jesus teaches us through the story of this woman is this one thing. If I'm going to ever fall in love and be in love and maintain love and sustain love, I must be longing after the one who can give me love. And the first thing God teaches us about love here is that love without forgiveness isn't love. Our culture teaches us how to divorce one another. We live in a culture that says, once you make a mistake, I could let you go. We're practicing divorce. Our kids have it worse off. We have 10-year-olds breaking up with each other. 12-year-olds going, I don't like you anymore. We live in a culture that says, I'm with you now, but I don't have to be with you later. I care about you now, I don't care about you later. I can break up with you whenever I feel like it, because the reality is forgiveness is out of the picture. And the reason why so many marriages are still struggling is because we've taken forgiveness out. We forgot, here's what we forgot. You married a sinner. Every time you want to give up on him, every time you want to give up on her, just remember, God probably had the same thought about you. And yet he's forgiven you. Every time you feel like he's not owning up to what he's supposed to be, just think about the many times you haven't owned up to who you're supposed to be. Long time ago, marriages would last 50, 60 years because of one simple thing. They learned how to forgive. They weren't more perfect than we are. There weren't better men out there. Y'all know there weren't better men out there. That's your fathers. But they had commitment. You had strong women who said, no matter what, I'm going to be here. We had men who said, I made a commitment, so I'm going to stick with it. But in today's culture, we've forgotten how to forgive, and we're like Simon. What kind of person is this? Standing from afar, better than the rest. And yet Jesus approaches Simon and goes, Simon, here's the reality. You're the one that's been loved much. You're the one that's received more than this woman ever did, because truthfully, watch. And many commentaries confirm what I'm thinking. Simon had some relations with that woman. Many commentaries confirm that there's a reason why he knew what kind of lifestyle she had. While this woman was a sinner, Simon was a religious leader, and yet still was dabbling with sin. And when Jesus got invited to his house, Jesus still showed up. he knew better, but was still dabbling in sin. When he invited Jesus to his house, Jesus still came. But yet here he is, sitting better than the next person, going, what kind of prophet is this? As we pursue after the one who's been longing after us, we learn one thing. I am loved because he is faithful and not me. And therefore, I ought to love, not because that person is lovable, but because the one who loved me. And if I can accept his love, and if I can receive his love, if I will answer yes to his will you be mine, then I can belong to another. But it starts with being loved. So for those of you perhaps who are on the other side of this marriage thing, and you're one of the D's, don't be ashamed. It's time for you to be free. No, there's a God who says, I still love you. For those of you who are struggling in marriage right now and you're wondering, maybe it's time I call it quits and I don't know where to go, just remember this one thing. He who is faithful is more than able to get you through this season. It's not over yet. It's only over is if you refuse to be loved by love. Because here's what happens when we are loved. We become lovable. And perhaps those of you who you're not in this marriage thing yet, but you're wondering, does love last? I have one word for you. The God who is love also happens to be eternal. His love never ends. Which is why he says in 1 Corinthians 13, love never fails. As we continue this series, the one thing I pray each and every one of you learn, and the one thing I pray that we grasp at the end of this series, is how to pursue after the God who's been longing after us. To be healed and restored by him so that we can learn how to finally belong to someone else. Because we know and rely on his love in order to love. If we keep pursuing after the wrong thing, we'll keep getting the wrong thing. But if you pursue after the right person, you'll have Mr. or Mrs. Right.